Let's get more reaction now on the decision. I'm joined by Professor Greg Craven, who is the Vice-Chancellor and President of the Australian Catholic University. Thank you so much for your time today. You've been a staunch supporter of Cardinal George Pell. Does this decision make you feel vindicated in your ongoing support?
I don't think it's a question of feeling vindicated one way or the other. It's not a surprising decision. This was a case that always had a reasonable doubt a mile wide. It shouldn't have been prosecuted. It should not have resulted in a guilty verdict. And I think most lawyers thought that sooner or later, once it got to the High Court, this was the default setting. I think the question is why such a case was prosecuted, what damage it did.
We'll come to some of those questions in a moment. You provided a character reference for George Pell ahead of his sentencing. Did you have contact with him while he was in prison?
Yes, I visited the Cardinal on 2 occasions. I had no hesitation in doing so. It's in fact part of the Catholic religion to visit prisoners in jail. And it's hardly surprising, given what I just said to you about that case, that I believed it was a case that had a reasonable doubt a mile wide that eventually would rip it apart. It hardly would be a disincentive to visit someone who was subject to that charge.
What did he tell you about his time in jail?
I'm not going to discuss what he told me about his time in jail. I can certainly tell you one thing he said, which is that being innocent certainly made it easier to bear being in jail.
Today, Cardinal Pell issued a statement saying, amongst other things, his trial was not a referendum on the Catholic Church, nor a referendum on how church authorities in Australia dealt with the crime of paedophilia in the church. Is that what you thought happened in this case?
I think that's very much what happened in this case, and I have to say I think your organisation, the ABC, did its very best to be part of the cheer squad that made that happen. The question about George Pell was not whether you liked George Pell.
What makes you say that the ABC was part of the cheer squad?
What I'm just saying says that it wasn't a case about whether you liked George Pell or whether you would like George Pell to be in jail. I think the truth was that it was a case about whether it happened. A large group of the ABC and a group of 9 journalists did everything they could to put as much pressure, to drown out any possible contraventions. I think worked closely with police to make sure that there were coincidental leaking of information, references to victims rather than complainants. I think that was a shocking aspect of it. I was very interested to hear the reporter just coming in before. You've just had a decision 7-0 of the High Court, crushing one of the most important cases in recent history. And what the ABC is now doing is trying to talk up redacted bits of the Royal Commission, talk up civil cases that haven't even been held. It's extraordinary.
Is that you're saying talking up, but isn't that just stating the facts of the developments that have taken place over the course of today?
No, with great respect, it's not. What has happened today is that the High Court unanimously, 7-0, said the Victorian justice system got it hopelessly wrong and restored a person who has been consistently referred to by a variety of media, including leading members of the ABC, as a convicted pedophile, which he is now not, nor can it be said. That's the news of the day. It is astonishing that an organisation like the ABC, who places so much emphasis on its trust, is rapidly now trying to divert attention from that fundamental fact that you got hopeless.
I'd say management would vigorously reject those accusations, Greg Craven. Let's move on, because you've had your say about the ABC. We're not talking about the ABC. It's not the subject of the interview.
You're interviewing me, and I'm giving answers.
Yes.
Management can't.
I'd like to move on from this point because I feel like you have had your say on it.
A failure like that.
Do you have sympathy for the accuser and for other victims of sexual abuse by clergy who are so disappointed and angry with today's decision?
I have incredible sympathy for them, and I particularly blame certain people for what's happened. So in this case, you have a complainant who evidently was highly credible. There's no reason to believe that he did not believe that he was telling the truth. The biggest problem that he had was that he was in a case that was never going to go through to, from his point of view, a successful ending. The reason that case was prosecuted, the reason that case went as far as it was precisely because of the media fracas that I've been talking about. So the question I have for you is, how much guilt does the ABC feel, having made sure that this victim has gone through years of hell only to be hurled down when the case should never have been brought?
Okay, should there be a review of the Victorian judicial system as a result of today's appeal being upheld?
I have no view on whether there should be a review of the Victorian judicial system. I think there are various things that people have talked about whether there should be cases of trial by judge alone. I think the Victorian police, or elements of them who did everything they could during the investigative process to try and promote a conviction, referring to complainants as victims, constantly leaking that charges probably would shortly be laid, as I say, very often in conjunction with journalists, very often the ABC. I think those police, who of course are currently the subject of a royal commission in relation to the use of lawyers as police informants, they have huge questions to ask.
The Catholic Church has been severely damaged by this case. Can it recover, or is the damage irreversible?
I think the Catholic Church has to account for everything that has been done, for the terrible abuse that has happened. It has to compensate, it has to reciprocate, it has to do all of those things. But yes, the Catholic Church will recover. Its works of charity and its works of mercy will go on. And let's face it, what happened today was not something where the Catholic Church was proved to have done something wrong. It was a case where a member of the Catholic Church was found not guilty of something that a very wide range of the media had been pushing as far as it could for as long as it could.
Okay, Greg Craven, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.